Hello, folks, and welcome to Saving Miller. So we've we've been on this journey on our homestead here for the last 3 years, and for the last 2 years, I've been talking to you guys about homesteading and how important it is, how valuable it is, and what a good idea it is. Well, today I've got a warning for you. So over the past couple of years, I've been seeing things develop globally that are quite concerning, and they should really be concerning you. There's a lot of things going on, but if we look specifically at food, you can see there are problems brewing. Okay, and these problems were developing well before the conflict in Ukraine escalated and things like that. The total disruption of shipments there definitely showed how big of a problem it is on the horizon. But the problem already existed, and things have been, going wrong for quite some time. So in the Netherlands, the farmers there are very, very good at their job. The Netherlands is a tiny country that exports a huge amount of food. They're the second largest agricultural exporter in the world. That's globally bigger than Brazil and many, many other countries that are actually large in size, but actually export less. So we've got the conflict there. We've got Sri Lanka. I bet most of you don't know Sri Lanka fell apart because of the government regulating agricultural fertilizer. Literally, that's why it fell apart. That's why they kicked them out. Because the farmers can't produce any food anymore. And it destroyed their economy just by stupid regulations that didn't work. Now, in principle, I agree with with the intent that they had, but the way they did it, of course, was a government way, and they didn't realize how stupid it was, and that it would simply destroy them and the Sri Lankan economy. This was about food and food control. So, over the past couple of years, governments have realized that if they declare a public health emergency or a climate emergency or some kind of an emergency, it basically gives them the power to do whatever they want. And typically, what really happens behind the scenes is that they're funneling money to where the politicians and the corporations want it to go. So during the public health emergency, billions and billions and billions of dollars went to large corporate pharmaceutical and medical companies to, deal with the public health emergency. Well, that's super convenient for these companies to receive all that government money. It's just a windfall. It's just free money for them. And so, of course, they're going to be very interested in the next public health emergency and how they can profit from that. The same thing is happening with food. So during this public health emergency that we had, the food supply was extremely disrupted. And the government didn't take too much action, but they did require a particular plant to reopen so that they could process food there. So I think to understand what we're dealing with here, you have to step back and say, okay, we have a food problem. Well, where does my food come from? Well, if you have food that comes in a box or a bag or any kind of packaging, it almost certainly is going to contain one of the above, maybe most of them. It will have corn, it will have wheat, it will have soy, and other large-scale agricultural products, maybe canola oil, maybe sunflower oil, maybe peanut oil, um, something of those basic food commodities. They shouldn't be basic food commodities, but that's what they've become. It's going to contain some part of those commodities in either its actual product or in its production. So you might have a potato chip that is boiled in peanut oil or canola oil. And so these are large scale farming operations. These are massive agricultural products that are produced by very, very large corporations. There's not many little farms that produce something like this on scale, because you have to have massive machinery, and you have to be able to dial in your seed inputs and your fertilizer inputs to a very, very minute fraction. Like, you've got to be really, really good at it. You've, the amount of precision that goes into producing this large scale agricultural product is incredible. Like, it's really impressive. But what it has done is effectively taken the power away from the little people. So if you go to your grocery store, all those shelves that have all those mass-produced products on there that are relatively cheap, everybody can afford them. Those almost certainly come from large-scale agriculture. And so then you've got the machinery. Now the machinery is no joke. These machines are massive. They take a lot of moving parts, a lot of electrical components, hydraulic systems. They're really complex. And then you've got the tractor to pull it, and it costs as much as a house, even with today's inflated numbers, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're really expensive. And so the little farm is not cutting it. And these farms are producing these massive amounts of these agricultural products. It can be potatoes and carrots too. They actually do carrots, right here in the fields around us. And they load them onto semis, and then they take them to processing facilities, and they get sorted, and they get boxed, and then they get sent to other food processing facilities that package it up. They sort it, they clean it, all of this stuff. More trucks, they take it to a distribution warehouse, and then more trucks, they take it to the grocery store finally. The warehouses, the way that the food is stored, massive refrigerated. We're talking warehouses that are bigger than our property here that are refrigerated, and freezers that are pretty big too. So all of that food gets stored in very energy intensive places. So if you lose diesel fuel, or you have a trucker protest and strike, the food supply is in grave danger. And the concern is that the government will then take initiative and either force people or use the military to provide logistics to get the food to where it needs to go. All of these things are a very bad scenario for all of us. We do not want this to happen. And I don't know if there's a short-term solution, but things are not looking good for this fall. I'm not the only one that's saying this. You've probably heard this. There's going to be a food shortage. I don't know if we're actually in too much trouble here in the U.S., but that shouldn't be any kind of comfort, because things that affect the global economy and other countries, even poor countries that we may not have much to do with, will still affect us. It's going to change pricing. It's going to change availability. If you remember the public health emergency, suddenly you couldn't buy toilet paper and people were hoarding it. The same thing is going to happen. There will be products that you can't get. And I would assume that's going to be things like bananas and maybe avocados and things that are produced in other countries that we consume a lot of, but don't really produce in the U.S. Those are the kinds of products that are going to be in trouble, most likely. But there's other products too. I mentioned wheat. I mentioned some of those things, and meat is a big one. Now, I am also not a fan of factory-produced meat. It's not very good food. I mean, you might as well eat a bag of Doritos. It doesn't. The food quality. Okay, the meat is a little bit better for you probably, but the food quality of the mass-produced meat is worthless. Like, I hate it. So really, I've been talking about this for several years. Grow your own. Grow your own. Find someone who is growing their own and has a little bit of surplus and can, provide for you as well. That's what we do with the beef. That's why we have 3. We only need about one beef a year, a little bit less than 1 actually, for our own consumption. We don't need 3. But we do that because we can provide for our friends and neighbors, plus they help to keep the grass down. I don't have enough right now because I got a lot of grass. But this is what I think is coming. I think there will be public health emergencies declared, and there will be power grabs by governors, by mayors, by presidents, by dictators, and so forth. They'll declare states of emergency, and they will take actions that will directly affect you, most likely. Probably the best example of what happens is in Canada. So Canada declared essentially, they have a different term for it, but they essentially declared martial law that gave the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, the ability to basically make any decision he wants. Like he was essentially exempted from the laws. And the declaration was that the sovereignty of Canada is under threat. That is what triggered the ability to implement these emergency powers to do whatever he wanted. And so they froze bank accounts, they seized assets, they arrested people. They essentially did contact tracing and eliminated people's funds, shut their businesses down, froze their assets so they couldn't continue to function in a normal way. And most of these people were quite innocent. And during that time, to the best of my knowledge, there was not one single Canadian or any other person who was injured, seriously injured, or killed. It was a bunch of nothing. There was a peaceful protest going on. Whether you agree with what they were protesting or not doesn't really matter. They were peacefully protesting something that they were upset about. And the government took these actions, froze people's money, took people's money. They took Americans' money, actually. They seized assets that Americans had sent to Canadians, and the government seized those assets. Think about that. Because of this emergency declaration that the sovereignty of Canada was under threat. So the lengths that government will go to consolidate power either within the government or within corporations is quite extreme, and we have to take actions to avoid this from happening. And there's a lot of things I could suggest. You fill in the blank. There's probably the best way is to use the knowledge and abilities that you have to affect your local community and your elected officials. But this is what I see coming, and this is why we have put a lot of work into making sure that we are going to be able to provide a lot of our own food. Our garden has produced quite well this summer, and hopefully this winter we'll be able to just keep it rolling. Our garden produces pretty much year-round, and we are very, very privileged to have that ability here with the weather that we have. In addition, we've got the turkeys, we've got the chickens. We have some bad news on these fronts. So we used to have 3 breeding flocks, so we could hatch ducks, we could hatch chickens, we could hatch our own turkeys. Well, unfortunately, maybe 2 months ago, something got the ducks. We had a drake and 5 ducks that vanished. I mean, they were gone. We had one lonely duck who was sitting. She went broody, which is quite unusual for Anconas. But she went broody, and she had a little nest over there and was sitting on about 8 or 9 eggs. And so she was away from the rest of the flock, and the predator, whatever it was, I think it was a hawk, didn't get her. So she's still here. You probably hear her quacking. Same thing with the turkey. Our beautiful Royal Palm Tom turkey got taken out by the coyotes. 7 o'clock in the morning, very brazen, so very upsetting. He was beautiful, he was a good bird, and he was guarding his flock. He got between the babies and the coyote and put himself in harm's way to protect his flock. So now we've got to find another one. Hopefully this fall we can find hatching eggs again and be able to hatch. On the good news side of this, though, turkeys, it takes 28 days for a turkey egg to hatch. And so we've got little babies that are about 2 weeks old now, and we've got another turkey she is currently sitting on 8 or 9 viable eggs out there in the coop. So we are hoping that she will hatch as well. So we're fortunate. We've got, we've got the 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We've got 11 turkeys now in various stages. As far as I know, there's no toms. Now, we want a tom from another flock, hopefully, but right now that's the situation. So even raising your own food is not super secure. There's things like this that can go on, but it gives you a chance. It gives you a much better chance, and you don't have to rely on the government and corporations to essentially fulfill their word, and put food on the grocery store shelves. So I would strongly suggest that you take any actions you can now before things get worse, and look out for yourself, your neighbors, your community. Till next time, Saving Miller out.